If you're watching this video, then it probably means that you're considering quitting your job in order to pursue content creation full-time, or perhaps pursue your own business, or just generally a life on your own terms outside of the conventional 9-to-5. But before you do that, there are a few crucial things that you need to know and consider. To give a bit of context, I took that leap this year for myself, and if you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Tika, and I quit my job in banking and I moved from Malaysia to Australia under a year-long work and holiday visa in order to focus on my YouTube channel, to build my personal brand, and to also start my own business. I released a video recently where I talked about all the reasons why I did that, and today I thought it would be really important to give a more in-depth follow-up to that. So in this video, I'm going to give you my honest and unfiltered opinion of the reality of quitting the 9-to-5 based on my own personal experience. Second is I'm going to share a bit more about my unique position in life, as well as the privileges that I had going for me, which allowed me to make that leap. And most important of all the strategic things that I did in order to prepare me to quit my job, financial and otherwise. Timestamps below as always because I value your time. So first and foremost, let's get into the reality of what it's like to actually quit your 9-to-5 based on my personal experience. And I guarantee you, it is probably not what you think it is. I feel like a lot of people have this overly romanticized view of what it's like to quit your job. Like, wow, she just suddenly decided to quit her job and she's chasing her dreams, and wow, how exciting and inspiring. But it was not all sunshine and roses, and in fact, it was very far from it. I just really want to emphasize how this was not a decision that I made overnight. In fact, it took me 3 years of questioning myself and being in a lot of pain and going back and forth and going crazy trying to figure out whether corporate was the path that I wanted to stay on, or whether there was a better path for me out there. And if there was, then what would that path even look like? And by the end of it, would all of the uncertainty and the hard work pay off? I did a lot of groundwork in those 3 years, and I'll talk about this in more detail when I cover the strategic things that I did to quit my job. The second thing I wanted to cover is my unique position in life and all my privileges. So I had a lot of things going for me which made that leap less nonsensical. Firstly, I'm young, I'm 27 as of this recording, and your 20s are the best time to be exploring and making all these mistakes because you can more easily bounce back from them, as opposed to when you're older and you have more commitments such as children or mortgages to pay or whatever it is. And that brings me to my second point, which is the fact that I don't have any kids or any family members who are financially dependent on me. Next is that I have a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering from the UK, and I've also got 4 years of work experience under my belt in both engineering and banking. So basically, if I wanted to go back down the conventional path and if I wanted to get a steady paycheck again, then it would be completely doable. Of course, I would probably be a step behind my peers in terms of salary and ranking, but I decided that that was something I could definitely live with because it's a very small price to pay in comparison to the potential reward that I could get if I were to pursue my own path. Next is that I have savings from years of working and side hustles and investments. And when I considered the worst case scenario, which is, essentially running out of funds and I have to stop doing what I'm doing, then I would just go and live with family for a little while whilst I get back up on my feet again. And so really the worst case scenario wasn't even going to be that catastrophic. Next, I'm going to cover 5 strategic things that I did which prepared me to quit my job. Firstly, I did a lot of groundwork within those 3 years that I was working in banking. I was reading a whole bunch of books on entrepreneurship and just consuming anything and everything that I could about content creation and business and digital products and sales and marketing, and just arming myself with all of that knowledge. I went through a whole bunch of different side hustles too. Like, it was a whole mix of things like taking care of people's cats whilst they were away on holiday. I was also doing some modeling jobs for this agency, and I was also like a ghostwriter for someone else's literary book blog. So it was a bunch of different things. And in parallel, I was also thinking and brainstorming a lot about what businesses I could potentially start, which I could then scale. I also started my YouTube channel a whole year before I quit my job, and that gave me considerable progress in building my personal brand. To elaborate on this point further, it's really important to have some sort of proof of concept before quitting your job, and that's just evidence to show that what you're doing is somewhat working. And this helps a lot to minimize the risk involved. So by the time I quit my job, I think I was on around 15k subs on YouTube, which is not an awful lot by any means, and definitely not enough for you to go full time. But the trajectory of the channel and its growth was enough for me to feel with a good degree of confidence that I was headed in the right direction and that I was doing the right things. So Just to round off this point and considering everything that I've said, by the time that I quit my job, I basically had a very solid understanding of what the trajectory of my life were to look like and how I would go about doing it. The second strategic thing that I did was I had a game plan. So I applied for a work and holiday visa in Australia because it would allow me to be here for 12 months and to also work any job that I wanted as long as I don't work for one employer for more than 6 months. And also with this visa, there is no cap on how many hours that I can work in a week. So I knew that if I worked enough hours, then I could definitely cover all of my living expenses and all my necessities. So the plan was to work part-time to cover living expenses so that I would not have to dip into my savings. And everyone has their own way of going about this. For example, some people, they like to save up a whole bunch of money before quitting their jobs so that they can just burn through their savings for the next 1, 2, or 3 years and just fully focus on building their business. But for me, I wanted to take the more risk-averse route. I didn't want to dip into my savings whatsoever, and my rationale behind that is because I didn't want to stress out about money and running out of it whilst I was working on my business and my content, because that would be using up the mental and emotional bandwidth I would otherwise use in order to build my business. And also, like I've mentioned before, I worked in Malaysia and we don't get paid as well as our Western counterparts, for example, and because of that, I didn't really have a ton of money saved up to just burn through. So I'd recommend figuring out how you want to go about it and figure out what would be the least mentally taxing route for you. Are you more okay with sacrificing some time in order to not dip into your savings that much? So like what I'm doing basically. Or would you rather just burn through money but give yourself all the time in the world? Another FAQ that I get a lot is why Australia? Because Australia, as we all know, is not the cheapest country in the world to live in. And my rationale for that is that Australia has one of the highest minimum wages in the world. Per hour, it's around $24.10, and you also get this penalty pay thingy, which means that if you work weekends in certain industries, you can get up to 150% of your hourly rate, so that would be like $36. And if you work public holidays, you can even get up to 250% of that hourly rate, which amounts to $60 an hour. Another reason for why I chose Australia is because Malaysia only has these work and holiday partnerships with 2 countries, so it was either going to be Australia or New Zealand, and I chose Australia because I actually have a friend here, so it really was a no-brainer for me. And so yeah, my game plan was to be in Australia for 12 months because that's how long the visa allows for, and I calculated that I needed to work 3 days a week part-time just to cover all of my living expenses and all my necessities, and for the rest of the week I can just focus on building the YouTube channel and building the business and also exploring and having fun, because that aspect is also very important. The next thing I did was to prepare myself financially. Basically, you want your money to last as long as possible, and there are 2 ways that you do this. Number 1 is to save as much as possible before quitting, and number 2 is to spend as little as possible after you quit. But actually, I would say that you should start getting into the habit of spending less even before you quit your job. And I'll talk about this in more detail and the whole idea of lifestyle reduction in my next point. So in 2020, which is the year that I graduated, I really got my shit together financially. I set up all my investments, I was tracking my spendings and budgeting all my money and making sure that I was living a life that was well below my means. I also had savings that I had from previous part-time jobs and professional employment and side hustles that I did. Before I came to Australia, I also sold a whole bunch of my things just to generate more money. A lot of people actually asked me about this, and I was thinking of creating a whole separate video on how I prepared myself financially in greater detail in order to quit my job. And the reason why I didn't want to talk about too much in this video is because I didn't want to make it super long. But do let me know if you'd be interested in a video about that, and also let me know in the comments what specific things you'd like me to cover in that video. Let me know as well if you'd be interested to see a video on what I spend in a week as well in Melbourne as an unemployed person. Although technically I'm not completely unemployed. The next thing I did was I got into the habit of spending less. When you're working corporate and you're getting a steady paycheck increase every year, then it's very easy to fall into the trap of lifestyle inflation, which means that when you get paid more, you tend to spend more. For about 6 months before I quit my job, I started to emotionally prepare myself to quit any unnecessary spending so that after I quit my job, I can make my savings last as long as possible and I can learn to live live on less, because when I learn to do that, then that means I don't have to work as many hours in my part-time job in order to cover all my living expenses and necessities. And in turn, that means I can spend more time on the YouTube channel and on my business. And this whole idea of lifestyle reduction can be tough for many people, and it was definitely tough for me too, because you're so used to having certain comforts in your life and spending a certain amount of money, especially when you have like a steady paycheck. But I just remind myself that this is the price that I have to pay in order to pursue the life of my dreams, and that it would all be worth it in the end. Also, if you guys would be interested in seeing a video on lifestyle reduction and how to be happy with less, then do let me know in the comments below. The next thing that I did was build a support network for myself. And I think this is a hugely overlooked point when people talk about quitting their 9-to-5. When you're pursuing content creation or your own business, it is a very lonely journey and a very lonely endeavor. And the majority of people don't really opt for this life. When you quit your job and when you come out the other side, you want to make sure that you have allies. You want to know people who are either going the same direction that you're going or who are already there. This is super important because these are the people who are going to support you on the days that you feel like giving up and you feel like you just can't go on anymore. So for me, I joined this mastermind group of other YouTubers where we meet on a weekly basis and we give each other feedback on our videos and we just support each other emotionally through this process. I've also reached out to other creators and entrepreneurs online and in real life. And on another note, if you're planning to move to a different country like I did, then it really helps to know at least one other person there before you go. So for me, I had my friend Marina, who I've known for years back from school, and that really helped to make that transition a lot easier and a lot less scary. But even if you don't know anyone in that country, you can always reach out to people online or in forums before going there. So those are all of the things that I did and considered before quitting my 9-to-5, and I really hope that this video helps you guys who are also on a similar journey to me. Like I mentioned earlier as well, I am planning on making a more in-depth video about how I financially prepared myself to quit my job. So do let me know in the comments below what specific things you'd like me to cover, specific questions you'd like me to answer in that video, and I'll do my very best to include those. Okay guys, take care and see you in the next video.